Welcome back to the latest episode of Unscripted, a LeaseLock podcast. My guest today is Katherine Maestas, a community manager with Kiva Residential and an advocate for people-centric leadership. See, over the past 4 years that she has been involved in multifamily, Katherine has emerged as a leading voice on platforms like LinkedIn, advocating for better leadership and leadership training for on-site teams. And when we first started planning for this episode, I thought that was where our conversation would center. But after I started to hear about her background and what experiences shaped her viewpoint, I knew I wanted to go a different direction. See, prior to COVID, Katherine was in the fitness industry, leading sales teams, and she believes, and I agree, there are a number of practices leveraged in running gyms that can and should be brought to multifamily operations and leadership development. And it very well may be the gym rat in me, but I couldn't help but ask her to talk through that with me, as well as her unabashed focus on mindset and grit, topics of her soon-to-be-released podcast platform, Chasing Grit. But before we dive in and chase grit with Katherine, just a reminder that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of LeaseLock. The content is intended for general informational purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice or endorsements. While we strive to ensure that the content is as accurate and up-to-date as possible, LeaseLock makes no representations or warranties of any kind, expressed or implied, regarding the accuracy, completeness, or reliability of the information discussed. The content is provided as is, and LeaseLock assumes no responsibility for any errors or omissions. Listeners should consult with qualified professionals before making any decisions based on the content of this podcast. This podcast may include references to third-party sources which are provided for convenience and informational purposes only. LeaseLock does not endorse or take responsibility for the accuracy or reliability of any third-party content. In no event shall LeaseLock, its affiliates, or any of its employees, officers, or agents be liable for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, or consequential damages arising out of or in conjunction with the use or the reliance of the content of this podcast. Now, with the highly scripted disclaimer out of the way, let's chase grit and get unscripted with Katherine Maestas. Katherine, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. I got to tell you, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to kind of give a little introduction to yourself and whatnot. But when I first reached out to you about coming on, I thought we were going to have a conversation around the journey to become a LinkedIn influencer in multifamily, because you've absolutely become that. But when we first talked, I'm like, no, we got to go a different direction with this.
No, totally different route. Yeah.
So give everybody a little bit of update of kind of who you are, what you do, and then I'll kind of introduce what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have only been in the property management field for 4.5 years. It'll be 5 years in August. Prior to that, my background is predominantly sales. I've been doing sales since I was about 19 years old. I started in the wedding and bridal industry. And if you don't think that's stressful,
Wow.
just go spend a day helping a girl find a wedding dress and deal with, future mother-in-laws, the mom, all of that good stuff.
It's been 30 years since it's been 30 years since I've done that, and I can still remember that vividly.
It was just, there was a couple of times I was like, I gotta go in the back. I can't talk to this woman anymore. It was wild. And then I served in LDS mission from 2011 to 2013. I learned so much about people, and I actually had a mission president who was a very successful real estate agent, and he said, if you guys don't think you're in business and doing sales right now, then you got another thing coming. And so it was just so much fun to take that missionary service, which is obviously predominantly more spiritual and religious, but see even 12 years later how I'm still utilizing those things that I used as a missionary. So I do make sure I put it on my resume, because that was really hard.
Sure.
And then I worked for Coach Handbags as a senior sales administrator, and was a top salesman with them for the year that I worked with them, and then transitioned over into the fitness industry. And that was kind of where I think I spent most of my sales experience, was in the fitness field. Reason I left, it definitely wasn't any choice of my own. The fitness industry got hit pretty hard with COVID. So that was a big change, and I knew I needed to quickly find something, and I didn't see anything changing anytime soon. So I jumped into multifamily.
Interesting. So I actually hadn't made the connection that your multifamily journey started during the entire COVID wave.
So I started August of 2020. So there was still like a lot of things were still up in the air. I was trying to plan my wedding at that same time. Didn't know if our venue was going to get to stay open or not. Like the job was still pretty interesting. There were masks and then there weren't masks. I could give tours and then I couldn't give tours. So it was kind of a wild experience learning this industry during all of that. It wasn't definitely during the height of everything, but it was definitely more like that downward slope. So it was a wild time.
Yeah, it was interesting. That whole time frame, we're not going to go too deep in this, but that whole time
Yeah.
frame was one of the things that I think the industry for the first time really realized, okay, we're essential. Like we became very front
Right.
and center in everyone's lives, and we're still feeling that a little bit from a political
Right.
perspective.
Yeah.
But the very end of your experience is where I didn't know we were going to go with this conversation when I first set it up. Because again, for 4.5 years, one of the things you have done, if people don't follow you on LinkedIn, they absolutely should. You've become a thought leader and a really from that and giving that operational voice to LinkedIn to a pretty significant audience. Like well done on
Thank
that.
you. Yeah.
But when you and I started talking, we started talking about, okay, well, what can the multifamily industry learn from your fitness experience? And maybe it's just because I'm a total gym rat that I was like, yeah, I want to go there. Let's have that conversation. But,
Right.
everyone loves to compare us to the hospitality, and I'm just as guilty as anyone of really thinking
Right.
about what can we learn from hospitality.
Yeah.
But like just off the top of your head, and we talked about a few things we'll dive into, but like what are the big things that you think having that experience on the fitness side, and correct me if I'm wrong, your experience there is not just from a sales perspective. You get the operational experience there too. What are the big things that you think we should be paying attention to?
So one of the things that I loved about the fitness industry is how whether you were on the sales side, you were a personal trainer, you're on the operations side, it doesn't matter, but especially within like a leadership position, you oversee people, right? Whether it's a sales team or your personal training clients, is we were taught to be coaches. I remember the company that I worked for, they made a switch with the personal training t-shirts because their t-shirts used to say personal trainer on the back. And they did like a whole study and decided we're going to switch up these shirts, but we're not going to tell the trainers what we're doing. They got them brand new shirts and removed the word personal trainer and put coach on the back.
Interesting.
And that just completely shifted everybody. And the idea was as these guys are walking around the gym floor, if you go to a public gym, you probably see a trainer with a client that is using the same equipment that you are. But the idea was we need to make you guys more approachable. Because people need to understand you're not a personal trainer, you are a coach. There's this idea that a personal trainer is this big heavy duty personal trainer macho guy who does steroids and he's super buff and he wants to teach some woman how to bench press 350, but she's not interested in doing it. It's like that's not what personal trainers are, and that's not what you guys are. But because the word is associated with you guys, we need to switch this. So they switched it to coach, and it completely changed the trajectory of everything for us. My specific role, I was the manager over the sales team, but I was not called a sales manager. I was called a sales team lead. So those two words of coach and lead are completely different, but it forced you to operate in a different way and not operate from a manager perspective, but operate from a coach and leader perspective. And we constantly went through rigorous training, not so much of how to teach someone how to do a kettlebell swing, but how to emotionally tap into somebody to get them to buy personal training, right? Someone doesn't buy personal training because you just taught them how to do the battle ropes correctly. They buy personal training from you because you just tapped into the fact, like I could think of one of the clients I had, they bought personal training because their doctor told them they can't get pregnant unless they start losing weight. So that's what we were able to tap into. We were taught how to tap into those things. It's not because, let me go show you how you use the TRX straps. That's not what sold them. What sold them was hitting that nerve and getting a few levels deeper. That's what made you buy from me. It's not the exercises, right? But we were taught how to be coaches. So we were taught the mental aspect of what we did, the psychology of the sale. And so within multifamily, a lot of what I talk about is like, we need to stop calling them like property managers. Like we need to come up with a different name
Oh, you're
of
going to get
some
me on a
kind.
soapbox on this one and big.
Yeah. We need to come up with a different name. And then, like we go through a lot of rigorous training of like, hey, let's have training on how to do variance notes. Let's have training on how to, scrub our financials. Let's go through training on doing our books kind of thing. And I think from the sports field, the fitness field, we can do some more training of, let's teach you guys how to think like a salesman and then how to think like a coach and a trainer, similar to in the sports field. Don't be that coach that's just standing on the sidelines and is like, hey guys, we need more leases. We need more applications. We need to boost occupancy. I've made a post about this before. That's no different than telling a personal training client, work harder. Well, what does that mean? Let's dial that in a little bit more. And so from there, let's dial it in a little bit more from a property management perspective and teach our property managers who are responsible for onboarding new hires, right? They're responsible for training the leasing agent, training the assistants. Let's teach our property managers how to dig even deeper. And it's like, that's going to require you guys to come out of your office. You don't just get to sit at your office anymore. And we need to start shadowing our leasing agents, because I guarantee when you are shadowing, you're going to see something that is being said or done that is we've just lost it. We've lost the application, but we need to teach our people how to notice those things.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack in what you just shared, Katherine, a ton, and I love it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because the first thing I thought of when you talked about the change from having just a simple thing that is a title, going from personal trainer to coach.
Right.
Think about the way that the gym goers probably found them much more approachable too, because you're no longer the personal trainer, you're actually the coach. And I know that's it's a subtle thing, but you're if someone's walking around with a personal training shirt, you know that that their time has been bought by someone specific, and to interrupt them or talk to them is now something that is stealing from somebody else, in other words.
Right.
And that small nuance of now it's a coach, because the coach is there to help all the players. Granted, they're going to help different players at different levels in different efforts. But I think that's something that's like I've been on okay, I started to talk about a soapbox. I've been on a soapbox for years now that we have lots of things in our industry that are just called the wrong thing. And I'll start with the big one. I'll start with the leasing office. The leasing office implies that what you care about is them committing to a lease.
Right.
It essentially happens once a year in most times, and I'll include renewals in that. They expect guest services or resident services. So why are we still building leasing offices and not resident services offices?
Right.
Why is there's so many, again, I'm going to try and not get on the soapbox.
Yeah, we can deviate so many different ways. Yeah, so many ways.
But it's interesting. So when you talk about, leading the teams, you've come into an industry that I'll say it. We're typically 10 to 15 years behind everybody else, especially from a technology perspective. But I also think from a leadership perspective and a mindset perspective. When you and I were talking offline, we'd kind of discussed the whole concept of, the one-on-one, like the ability to actually give folks the opportunity to take and digest what we've trained them on and put it into practice and then put it in their daily lives. How have you seen in your experience, and granted, you're not seeing a ton like the entire nation and everything else, but how have you seen in your experience where that could be applied, or some of those things could be applied better within multifamily?
Yeah. So I again, it definitely requires property managers to get out of their comfort zone a little bit, because I know our task list is usually starts at the day, 18 tasks to do, and then 18 more pile up, and you've only checked 3 things off your box and feel like you've accomplished nothing.
Yeah, and none of them were on the list when you started.
And none of them were the things you actually needed to get done, right? So I get it. But one of the things that's just so vital is like schedule time to coach your team. That's what you need to do, just like with anything, right? Schedule time to go to the gym, schedule time to have a date night, whatever. Like, you have to put it in your schedule if you know you're going to have quite the day. But it's going to require getting out of your comfort zone and stepping out to the team. Number one, we need to know what they are struggling with, not what we think they are struggling with, right? Because we can easily come in and someone sit us down and say, hey, your assistant, they really struggle with this. And it's like, okay, I'm still going to talk to her though and see what she struggles with. Thank you for that feedback now that she's my new assistant, but I'm still going to talk to her and see what she struggles with. Because then you can really fine tune the training there. It's no different than working with a coach, a personal trainer, right? You can't just say, well, I'm going to do this program for you. That doesn't work. This woman is probably 65 years old, struggles getting up and down from a chair by herself, and you're going to teach her how to power lift because you want to have her do a powerlifting meet in 6 months. That doesn't make sense. She needs to learn the basics of mobility so she can get up and down from a chair. But your 20-something-year-old that does want to compete in powerlifting, you're probably not going to do a whole lot of like functional mobility training with them. You have to fine tune it to the individual. And then from there, it's not just a one and done. Okay, I coached you. It's let's go in and see how you're doing with the coaching that I gave you. Now I'm going to add more to your plate because you're ready for more. Right. And then you continue to it's all the checking in. You can't just train your team once, have a one-on-one one time, and then honestly kind of reprimand them for not doing better after they've only gone through one drill.
Well, and you bring up a good point. It's both the personalization and the intentionality of it. I was thinking about, even something, again, continuing the fitness analogy on it, even something as simple as saying, okay, well, you need to do squats. Okay. In my 20s, that was back squats. Now in my 50s, it's Xerxer squats because I don't want that compression on my spine.
Right.
And
exactly.
it is those little things though that a good personal trainer, a good boss actually has those conversations and understands, okay, what's the goal? Both your personal goal, the professional goal of the organization, the ultimate financial goal of the property in these particular cases. What do you do really well, and how do I enforce that and reinforce that? And then what are the areas that could be improved that would help you achieve more towards ultimately what you're trying to achieve? I think that's, it's funny. One of the things that I think about a lot is, the move towards specialization or centralization in our industry. It's delivering a lot of value in there, but I think one of the things that it has the potential to break, and people who listen to this podcast on the regular probably know exactly what I'm going to say next, is that leadership development model in multifamily, because that assistant community manager, number one, probably isn't there anymore. They're probably a centralized role doing a specialized task, but they're not getting the exposure to all the things that would lead them to be the next great community manager. And then talk about the jump between community manager and regional manager.
Right.
That's a whole nother level. So I really do like the analogy towards putting together a workout plan for the individual, where they're at and what they're trying to achieve.
Well, and, to continue using the example of squats, I worked in that field for so long that when I go to the gym now, I can't help but just notice. And it's like, oh, I want to help you so bad, but I don't want to be that jerk that comes over and is like, hey, you're doing those wrong. And then, go back in. Right. Yeah. But I know how to pick up on it, because that was my job. I had to pick up on the little things you weren't doing correctly as a way to sell you on personal training. Right. So using the squat example, if you're it doesn't matter if you're doing back squats, you're doing bodyweight squats, goblet, doesn't matter. Just think of squatting. I can tell when you've got poor hip mobility and ankle mobility because you start to lean too far forward when you go down in your squat and you're up on your tippy toes and your heels are coming up. I am not putting a barbell on your back. I'm not even giving you a kettlebell. I'm actually going to give you the dumbest piece of equipment in the world. You get to have a PVC pipe. It's going to suck. You're going to train with me and be like, okay, seriously, Katherine, I told you I wanted to lose weight, build muscle. And it's like, I cannot help you do that when your hip mobility sucks and your ankle mobility sucks. Because then the second I put that 45-pound bar on your back and then add 2 plates on the side, now you have 65 pounds sitting on your back. You are now more susceptible to injury. I can't do that. So guess what? We're going to do hip mobility exercises. We're going to do ankle mobility exercises. And you do not get to have a barbell on your back for probably the next 60 to 90 days. Yeah, until that is corrected. And then we can start adding weight. But you got to trust me through that process. It's going to feel boring. You're going to feel like you're not progressing. I promise you, I know what I'm doing.
Well, and that's where again, to bring it back to multifamily, when someone says, okay, we've got to boost occupancy. Okay, that's like saying, okay, well, I've got to squat. You know, when we need to take the time, and again, development of folks is something I've always actually been really passionate about, even though I've been an individual contributor in companies for a very long time. You know, it is that passion that you can come in and say, okay, great. If occupancy is off, okay, well, that becomes a function of one of two things, which becomes a function of 4 or 5 other things, which becomes a function of everything else, and which ultimately leads down to, you know, the million different things we could be looking at. But much like you're describing from the personal trainer side, I do wonder, are we really teaching, as an industry, are we really teaching folks how to go through that effort and not just say, I need more leases?
Right. And I feel like that's where that lesson of the fitness industry can come into play with multifamily is I don't necessarily think we are, because we don't know how, and that's okay. This industry has been very transactional for a very long time. We've got a bottom line to hit. We are managing, some of us, multi-million dollar assets. They have to do well, because then they have to have a difficult conversation with investors and principals and everything else. So that I completely understand. But I really feel like within the last couple of years, we're seeing a shift within multifamily. Those things are still valid and important, and we still need to coach and develop on those, because if you've got a community manager that really wants to become a regional, he or she really needs to understand those things, because that's a huge part of their job. They're having the majority of those conversations. But we also need to jump into those smaller elements, similar to watching someone's hip mobility and ankle mobility while they squat or whatever else. It's the same thing with, we need to boost occupancy, we need more leases, but we're not getting them. I don't understand. You're sending your 50 emails, you're making 28 phone calls a day, you sent 15 texts yesterday. Why are there no tours scheduled from any of those? That's crazy. And then after a full week of all of those numbers, we still have no leases? That doesn't make sense. And so we need to teach our property managers how to go in and dial into those smaller pieces, because your team's squatting, they're just not squatting well, and you don't know how to catch on those small things to then be like, I found the source of the problem. And part of finding those is you need to schedule time of, like, you and I are going to tag team. You're going to make a phone call, I'm going to make a phone call, and then we're going to debrief afterwards. One of the things I loved about when I worked at Coach is we were required as the senior sales admins to debrief with the sales team after every interaction with somebody. Doesn't matter if they purchased something or not. We had to debrief with them, and especially debrief if they didn't get the sale. But it was, what was their price point? Tell me something personal you learned about them, and what product were they looking for? And oftentimes the sales guys could not answer all 3 of those. Well, and it was like, then you didn't ask. You didn't ask. You treated this person like they were a mere transaction. Our handbags start at $695, and he was here ready to buy like 6. But you didn't take the time to get to know this gentleman, and you're mad you didn't get the sale. But it's that debriefing after each interaction where we can better understand what is actually happening. But then when you get that information, you have to coach accordingly.
Well, and that's another area that I wanted to kind of dive into you with, because one of the areas, and it's you brought it from the coach side of the equation. I'm gonna bring it back to the fitness side of it. Is I think that the multifamily industry can also learn something from the way that those who do it well in the fitness industry do their guest services and their customer services, because there are a couple differences. Obviously, a gym can have unlimited memberships, but they have a limited amount of square footage.
Right.
That's not the case with multifamily. Multifamily, you've got a limited number of square footage that's specifically assigned. But that customer service model of the gym is, because granted, full disclosure, have a garage gym now. Haven't gone to a gym that I've paid for.
You don't have to go public anymore.
Yeah, in a long time. But when I was going to public and all that stuff, I knew everybody there, not because I'm outgoing, because I'm absolutely not.
Yeah.
But I was a regular, and they recognized I was a regular and made those efforts. So talk a little bit about what, and I realize I don't think we talked about this before, talk a little bit about your experience there and what you think might be able to be brought over.
Well, like you said, you were a regular when you were going to a public gym. So it's like, I guarantee when you scanned in at the front desk, it was, "Hey, Andrew, how you doing? What's the workout today?" Right? I guarantee someone asked you how your kids were doing. I guarantee someone asked you how work was going, how your recent trip was. Doesn't matter. And then you just went on your merry way. And then when you walked out, sweaty and exhausted, you got a quick fist bump and then you went out the door, right? I guarantee you didn't keep going to that gym just because they had a piece of equipment that you liked.
True.
I guarantee a big part of the reason you kept going is those front desk guys knew exactly who you were, not just from like a fitness perspective of, oh, he likes to do, endurance this, endurance that, and that's all I know about Andrew, but they really knew you and took the time to be excited that you were coming to the gym. Working in the fitness field, my favorite people to talk to, and I always told people, like, if you see someone come to the front door that wants to talk about memberships or personal training, and they look like they are about to burst into tears because they are so intimidated to be in here, you need to give them to me. Those were my favorite people to talk to, because what I wanted to do was, number one, I want to acknowledge that this is actually really scary for you. And my job is to break that ice. You have no reason to be intimidated. I got you, and I'm going to be with you every step of the way. And as we did the tour of what I was a big believer in, and I actually teach my leasing agents this, is when someone comes in for a tour, don't just immediately grab keys and go start touring the building. You haven't even learned their name, what they're looking for, what's making a move. You have learned absolutely nothing personal about them. How awkward is that elevator ride going to be? And then all of a sudden, as you're on the tour, it's like, "So where are you from?" And it's like you've lost them. Your opportunity of doing all of that and getting to know them was the first 30 seconds that they walk through the door. We have these gorgeous lobbies and we don't even use them. So my leasing agents know to grab their laptop, go sit out in the lobby and talk to the person, right? Not the lease, not the application, the person, and get to know them first. Because then that makes your tour so much easier. Obviously, with multifamily, it's a little bit different because in the gym, you can get away with not showing everybody everything based on how you got to know them. Where in multifamily, you kind of have to be careful because of fair housing and make sure that, like, well, I'm not going to show you the gym because you don't look like the kind of person that works out. Like, you kind of have to tread a little bit carefully and make sure you are giving the most consistent tour. But if you've gotten to know the individual, you can pretty much just like, this is the gym. We already talked about it. You have a private gym that you go to, but this is here if you need it. And then just quickly breeze right past it. But oftentimes when we're not getting to know people, we're not personalizing our tours in the slightest. When we're inside the apartment, you're not even pointing out the features that they told you were really important to them. You're just kind of giving this blanket tour, this generic that you really hope works for every single person and really hopes generates an application. And this is not how this industry works. We like you said in the beginning, we get compared to hospitality, and yes, there's hospitality aspects we need to do. The difference between us and hospitality is their guests leave.
Yeah.
They leave within 2 days, 7 days. They go home. Our people are at home. And yet we see these people every single day, and oftentimes we don't act like it. From the leasing experience to what the living experience is going to be. And I'm a big believer that however the leasing experience is a very key indicator of what it is going to be like to live at that community. And that can make or break getting a lease or not.
I absolutely agree. And as you're talking about that, the word that just kept popping in my head is transactional. Like we've just focused, especially with someone new, and I'm thinking about onboarding. And again, I always want to caveat this, it's been 15 years since I ran properties. So I did it for 20 years, but it's been 15 years since I've done it. But the trainings that I have delivered, like I've delivered a ton of trainings on different software platforms and everything else, they're all transactional. It's transactional training. Even the leasing trainings that I've done back when I was doing revenue management, it was, okay, well, how do you sell using revenue management? And oftentimes we'd have to go back to selling 101, which is exactly what you said. It is actually building a rapport and a relationship. And the rapport is more than just, did you smile and stand up when they walk through the door? Which, by the way, you should do. Like, everyone do that.
That should be, basic.
You'd think it's table stakes, but it's not. But it's that idea of what you said, like build that your opportunity to welcome them to your community, and people, they're called communities for a reason,
Right.
starts the moment they start interacting with you. And that is
Absolutely.
another area that I think, again, from the fitness perspective, every gym that I've ever joined was about the people who are working there. And by the way, I would even put that into the Real Page gym that they had on corporate site. The team that we had running that expressed these same things. The group from Exos that was there was, they knew everyone by name and they were friendly. So much so that one of them was actually in the multifamily industry, and she came up to me at a conference earlier, or I guess late
That's
last
wild.
year. I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
even know
wild.
it.
Yeah.
So it is, I think there's a lot that can be learned from that perspective of
Yeah.
build the rapport. It's worth your time to
It
build
is.
that rapport.
And the thing is with building that rapport is it doesn't take very long, right? It's especially from the property manager side. Is I'm the type of property manager, and this is just the salesman in me, where I will jump into leasing and assist when she starts to get a little overwhelmed, and she's got 10 tours scheduled for
Yep.
the day. There's absolutely no way she can do those all by herself, so I will jump in. But the salesman in me, I don't mess with people's income. It's a very slow time of year. She has gotten every single lease for the last probably 3 to 4 months. That's just how it is, right? But one thing she does, and what's great is I have never asked her to do this. Before she heads upstairs for her tour, she introduces me to her tours. And I get, instead of just sitting there and be like, yeah, hi, and then just moving on, I don't really want to talk to you, but I hope you do an application. I'll get up and go say hi. What's making you move? What's bringing you here? We're super happy. Are you from Utah? No, this is where you need to go to dinner. This is where you need to have a drink tonight. It snowed, so make sure you go up into the mountains because it is gorgeous up there right now. And it's like, that had nothing to do with an apartment, right? But it had everything to do with a quick 30 seconds of building rapport and building that relationship.
It's really interesting you say that, because one of the things that I've dealt with over the years in team selling environments is getting salespeople to understand the concept of edification, of bringing someone else into the sales process is not about you appearing weak in this. Now, again, I'm going to a more corporate B2B sale than a B2C sale,
Yep.
but they then have the opportunity that they have the opportunity to edify the prospect, saying, hey, you're so important to me. I want you to take time out of my property manager's day to be able to meet and have that interaction, which edifies the prospect at that point. You then, as the manager, also then have the opportunity to edify the leasing professional.
Yep.
Katherine's going to take such good care of you. I'm so glad you're here and working with you. But if you need anything, please, like that concept of edification goes so far in a sales relationship, but especially applied to the world of property management. Because to your point, have I ever had a commission role? I don't think I've ever really truly had a commission role. I've been involved with a lot of sales, but not a commission role, because I want to do what's right for the business. I don't necessarily 100%. Want to do what's right for my pocketbooks. That's a really interesting way to do it.
And it's funny. It's funny you bring that up, because when I worked in the fitness industry, we had what was called a play, not so much a script, but it was just point A to point B to point C, D, all, like, this is what you need to do. Like, this was created by people that are so high above you, have the business and sales experience. Like, you have got to follow this. And part of the play, it was called a turnover, or TO for short. You needed to grab your sales lead or your GM. That was protocol, regardless if you felt like you got the sale or not. And it's funny because I was thinking about him the other day. I had a sales guy. He was brought to me because he was really struggling. So they brought him to me to, Katherine, you need to kind of help him out just a little bit. And he was notorious for not grabbing me. And that was part of the play, was you have to come and grab me. And so I had a conversation, and it was like, do you not trust me to help you get that sale? Do you not know how to find that break in the conversation to, like, come get me? Because I don't get any of that commission. We're not sharing it. But my job is to, like, help these people just feel so much more comfortable and trust that we're not trying to be a salesperson. We genuinely want to help you lose this weight so you can get pregnant. We genuinely want to help you lose this weight so you can feel more confident after your divorce, for your upcoming wedding, you name it, right? But you're not grabbing me. And it finally got to a point where we had to sit him down and say, you're no longer getting walk-ins. Any appointments that you have scheduled for yourself, I will now be taking them or divvying them out to the other fitness counselors, because you are proving that you can't be trusted because you don't trust me. And he had a free training session that was scheduled. And the idea after the free training session was to pitch him personal training and get him to buy, right? Well, this kid is standing there with the iPad ready to pitch them. And I was like, absolutely not. And this is a whole other tangent that we can go on in leadership of honoring what you say you are going to do, especially when it's the hard thing. And it was like, I told this kid that he was not going to get any of his appointments and tours. So do I go interrupt it and do it for myself? Or do I let him do this knowing he is not going to come grab me and we've lost yet another sale? So I walked up to him and I said, Justin, I'll take the iPad. And he looked at me like, you can't be serious. And it was like, yeah, I don't trust you because you don't trust me. And so we went over and sat at the desk, and it was a husband and wife. The husband did the free training session. The wife did not. She just stood there and watched. Long story short, he ended up buying 2 times a week for 6 months. So as I'm getting him wrapped up, his wife says, hold on, I want to do it too. And it was like, but you didn't do a training session.
Wow.
I'm about to get 2 out of 1. Yes. And so it was like, absolutely. She bought 1 time a week for 6 months. He bought 2. You got to do the victory walk where you walk to the office to go grab people their heart rate monitors. As I'm doing this, I make 0 eye contact with this fitness counselor of mine. I don't make eye contact with him. I'm in the zone of getting this deal. Get them all signed up, whatever else. And in that moment after they left, I had one of 2 options. I can either gloat and be like, I told you so, I got the sale, whatever. Or I can go up to him and let him know, you're better than that. I believe in you, but you need to start trusting me. So I walked up to him and I handed him the iPad and I said, those should have been yours. You need to start grabbing me for TOs. And that month forward, he was behind me in sales by half a sale. And then later on, he got a job with with a big name gym here in Utah, and they're all over California, Nevada, whatever. He became a general manager for one of their largest clubs here in Utah. And I love sharing that story because this kid went from not trusting me as his leader to help you with this person to now being a general manager of one of the largest clubs. And it's like, that's just such a fantastic success story. But I bring that up because we need to utilize something like that in multifamily of make a pit stop to the manager. You as a manager need to do a lot better job of actually coming out, saying hello, engaging with this individual, because you're also communicating to the leasing agent, this is going to help you and I actually want to help you. So then the job of leasing and getting us more applications and boosting our occupancy is not just on your shoulders.
Well, and again, there's so much to unpack in this, and there's so many tangents we can go down. But as you were going through that, I go back to a couple of things you've already said. Number one, you said get out from behind the desk. I say get out from behind the mouse. At that point, we've got to give our on-site leaders the ability to comfortably be able to do that, because at the end of the day, again, it's keeping your eye on the bigger prize as opposed to the smaller prize. The bigger prize is ultimately that financial performance of the asset is not. It's not that a variance report isn't important. I'm not saying
right,
that.
100%.
But
100%.
But if my choice is the variance report or go talk to my potential next resident, the potential next resident is probably going to have the larger financial impact overall
100%.
from a long-term perspective. Yep. But we've got to give people the opportunity to internalize that and be able to make those decisions, again, as opposed to necessarily go through a task list. But again, what we're talking about at that point is the lessons in leadership. It's the true leadership as opposed to, hey, we need to get these 12 things done. Which actually, one of the things you mentioned as well, you said you had the playbook. Is that what it was called?
Yeah, we had a play to follow.
So you had the play, and when you were describing that, honestly, the first thing I thought of was mystery shops on tours. Yeah. And I have a love-hate relationship with them.
Right.
I think they can absolutely be valuable, but I've absolutely seen, in fact, I'll tell a story. I worked for an organization where the GMs also got shopped. But
Yeah.
we did so little of the selling in that organization that when someone called specifically for me and asked for a specific like need from a corporate housing perspective, I
Right.
1,000% knew I was being shopped.
100%. Yeah.
It's an open book test, people. Like I never
Yeah.
scored anything less than 100. Do I think any of those were actually valuable sales conversations and actually would have closed a deal? Probably not.
Right.
So it is one of those things that I think about with the shops of, are we doing things just because we know we should and we can measure something, or is it actually a valuable portion and applied to your organization? So I don't know, total tangent, but yeah.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I definitely feel the same way with those as well. As there's a love-hate relationship. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's not. I mean, you have leasing agents, property managers, assistants that, not being very socially connected, you're kind of socially awkward, whatever else. But that scores against that person. And is that necessarily fair? Right. I want my leasing agent to 100% be herself. I
Yeah.
don't want her to feel like she needs to be like me or whatever else. It's more, here's some things that can help you that come from my sales background. And I also have a track history of being very successful in this industry. So I know that this is going to help you, but I want you to sound like Megan. I don't want you to sound like Catherine, because then that's just going to upset me, because then you're actually going to not be yourself. You're going to fluster throughout the entire tour, whatever else. I need you to be yourself. And I feel like our people that are at the front lines of leasing don't necessarily know how to be themselves or encouraged to be themselves. And so when that secret shop report comes back, it's like, hey, your property scored a 50%. So we need to figure this out. And it's like, of course we did. He's not comfortable on the phone or whatever else. Like there's a million different things. And so it's one of those things where it's like, how do we leverage that to help us with our coaching? But also at the same time, does secret shopping actually help us fine tune what the actual issues are? Because when you look at that secret shop, the questions are, did they ask you if you want to do an application? Did they show you the gym? Did they show you the pool?
Yeah.
Did they answer the phone? And it's like, okay, well, my leasing agent did do all of those things and they still didn't score well. So what are we talking about here? Because to me, this score isn't at all accurate. This is just, it goes back to the word transactional. This is a transactional spreadsheet that you are asking this secret shopper to just check off the box, yes or no, if they did that. To me, that is not a measurement of performance.
Yeah, I mean, I get this. I think this whole conversation so far can be summed up by, are you being transactional or are you being relational? Because that is really what we're talking about.
Yeah.
To wrap not to wrap this up, but to kind of start bringing around the corner. One of the things I've appreciated about your voice on LinkedIn, and I wonder if this comes from a little bit of your fitness background, because I see it a lot in the fitness space, is the focus in on mindset and the importance of mindset. In fact, one of the things you put out there, I don't know, this has been several months that you put this out, Catherine, but you put, nobody cares, work harder.
Yeah.
And I'm
definitely more. Don't follow me if you don't want abrasive posts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I almost wore the T-shirt that I have that has that on it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's great.
And honestly, for years before the pandemic, in my old office in my old house, I literally had that quote on the wall stenciled behind me.
Yeah, I love that.
But with the pandemic and cameras coming on, I felt like I couldn't actually have that in camera all the time.
Yeah, it was like, read the room.
Yeah, so I finally I did take it off the wall at that point. But where did this focus for mindset come for you? And correct me if I'm wrong, you're starting a whole new voice podcast, etc., on specifically mindset, not multifamily, just mindset, right?
Yep. Yeah. Because I believe that, and with that post, it wasn't, targeted at multifamily. It was just more, I think in that post, it was kind of like, and my husband and I have this conversation all the time, but I think in that post, I talked about how, it doesn't matter if you grew up in poverty or not. Nobody cares. Work harder, right? Yeah. It doesn't matter if you grew up with a parent that had a substance abuse problem, or you yourself had a substance abuse problem. Nobody cares. Work harder. A lot of this is, I feel like I've kind of always had this mindset. A lot of it comes from watching my mom, and I can't really talk a lot about her and her grit and mindset without getting emotional, because my mom, it just epitomizes grit and being relentless and having mental fortitude when everything is absolutely stacked against you. My mom epitomizes the phrase fall down 7 times, stand up 8.
Yep.
It's actually the reason in my personalized license plate, I have the number 8 on my personalized license plate. And my mom is the reason for that. And so watching her, in my mind, it's like, well, what other option is there? Like, I'm sorry things are hard. My response, get up. Like, if you need to go over, using the sports analogy, right? You need to go over and throw up for a second. You want to crawl down and into a little fetal position and cry for a second. That's perfectly fine. But you also need to get up.
Yeah.
And so with the podcast that I'm launching, I believe having this mindset of getting into this zone, regardless of what it is. It doesn't necessarily need to be your professional space. It could be personal. It could be financial. It could be spiritual, mental, emotional. I don't care. The name of the podcast, I chose the name Chasing Grit. And the reason I specifically chose Chasing Grit is because, in my opinion, I don't believe we ever actually catch it. It's kind of like a dog race, right? They've got a bunny out at the front, but those greyhounds are trying to catch the bunny, but they don't ever catch the bunny, but they have that grit and relentlessness to keep running anyway. I think you can become a person that has grit, but do we ever catch it? I don't know. Which is why I think you need to always be chasing it. I frequently post about lions and how they're my favorite animal in the world. And one of the things that I love about lions is they are not the best hunters. They're a terrifying animal and they're an apex predator, but they are actually one of the worst hunters in the animal kingdom.
They're
which
lazy
most people wouldn't know
90%
that.
of the time.
Yeah, they actually, I don't know how there's not more like starving to death lions, to be quite honest with you. But the thing I love, and the analogy I'm going with here is, but they hunt anyway. And they hunt anyway. Didn't get anything that time, gonna take a breather, and then we're going back out there. Didn't get anything, gonna take a breather, going back out there. That's chasing grit to me. That's chasing a relentless mindset to me. And when you have a mindset, and Tim Grover talks about this in his book, Relentless, when you go from good to great to unstoppable with your mindset, professional space, personal space, doesn't matter. You are actually now unstoppable. You are untouchable at this point. And I think it doesn't matter what you do for a living. When you have that mindset, that borderline is really intimidating and kind of causes people to be a little afraid of you. That's when I feel like you've made it. And that's a lot what the podcast is going to be talking about, is what that mindset looks like, how to shift it, how to get there, and then how to maintain it, and how it can just literally explode and permeate every aspect of your life.
Well, I'm excited to hear the conversations you're going to have, and I hope that if it's appropriate, you have one of the first ones be with your mom, because that sounds
cool.
like
that would be cool.
An amazing story. Although I don't know that you can get through it. So like that's
I don't know. I was gonna say it might be 3 hours long because there's gonna be a lot of this happening. We were actually texting each other last night, and our text conversation got us both into tears. So I really don't know how that episode's gonna go.
Well, I mean that all the more reason to do it and being real, which is actually one of the things that I really, again, I've loved listening to your voice on LinkedIn, and it's because if you don't follow Katherine already on LinkedIn, definitely go do it. There's a lot that she brings up. She's not afraid to ask hard questions that she doesn't necessarily have answers to, which is another thing that I really like about it. Katherine, other than LinkedIn, where can people find? It sounds like the podcast isn't quite out yet, so maybe it's not
quite out, but we've got a platform on Instagram, so it's the Chasing Grit podcast. So definitely give a follow over there. Definitely going to be posting just different little anecdotes of how to push that mindset, what that mindset looks like, and then we'll start dropping episodes there.
Awesome. Well, Katherine, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing your experience from the fitness industry. Anything else you want to share before we sign off?
Nobody cares. Work harder.
Awesome. Great way to end it.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Unscripted, a LeaseLock podcast. If you have found the information in this episode, or any other for that matter, beneficial in any way, the best way to support the work we do is to like and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll be sure to never miss a new episode when they drop. Also, sharing your takeaways in the comments or on the social media platform of your choosing, mine happens to be LinkedIn, is also a great way to help us get the message out. Additionally, if you would like to suggest a guest or perhaps be a guest on Unscripted, please head over to leaselock.com/unscripted, where at the bottom of the page, you'll find a guest submission form. We would love to help you tell your story. Until next time, make it a great day.